Today, we're looking at a red ink by Sailor Clown Teardrop Ruby. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below so that if you are in a hurry, you can skip around. But if you got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then inked up this Retro 51 Tornado with a broad nib, wrote with it for a day, and used it to take the notes for this video. I always standardize some of my writing samples by using Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper, although I do use more papers, and some of those will be seen later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to make sure I keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and really no shading. It just is. The extra fine is quite a bit darker than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer quite a bit of shading, like quick starts dark, gets light about the I, super dark around the K. Brown starts dark and gets light. Fox starts light, gets dark at the bottom of the F, and then gets light through the rest of the writing. 7 seconds to dry. Now, the scrubby shows no real color variation, although we do get some in the writing sample. Unfortunately, my medium nib that I was originally using lost its tip. And it's not saying anything bad about the Goulet nibs. It's something that can just happen, but I don't think any of these writing samples have any medium nibs in it because I had to wait to get a replacement nib before I could continue after this one. I had just finished this one, so I don't think there's others that come up like this. But, yeah, so I have no mediums here. Tomoe River. We have no bleeding. We have normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 11 seconds to dry. The medium's showing no color variation, and we got none. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a bit darker than the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen. I'm not really seeing shading in the writing here. 8 seconds to dry. The scrubby does show some color variation, far left to far right, but I'm not getting it in the writing itself. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see a very complex color here with a light purple at the bottom that's pushing its way up into a red magenta, more red than magenta, but a red magenta kind of color. Then we get a very darker orange and a super bright blue at the top. This is a very complex ink, and I would have honestly expected a lot more shading and character out of this ink just looking at that. Now the one on the right, I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And that kind of purple at the bottom, very there, very not moving, expecting that to truly be a hang-around color. Now largely the rest of that chromatography looks the same. That red magenta moves its way up. The orange is much more pronounced. The red sort of stopped a bit earlier. And that very highlighter blue at the top, still the same amount of representation. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles itself very well. I would have no problems using this in a note-taking situation because it had very little effect for being highlighted. Looking at the water, it removed everything except the blue that we saw in the second chromatography. That blue purpley tone that was at the bottom really still there, shows itself to be more blue than purple here in this test. Pen flush does a whole lot more than water did. If you look around the edges, you can start to see it really breaking the ink down. You start getting the hints of paper coming through, which means for me that pen flush is all you would need to get this out of your pen. Now, if for some reason you didn't find it good enough, you could use the 1/3 bleach solution. It does completely obliterate it off the page, although I don't think you're going to need it. As far as viscosity or flow, for the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Sailor's Clown Teardrop Ruby has a viscosity of 2.03, making this a wetter ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Sailor's Clown Teardrop Ruby has an average dry time of 9 seconds, making this pretty darn fast drying ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Sailor's Clown Teardrop Ruby, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I didn't want to take any attention away from this, so I went with a nice black, Diamine Onyx. The second writing sample is done on Vinta, black and red, and limon paper. Here we're looking at it on limon paper. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. Those spots coming through, that's the scrubby, so I don't really count that. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade, 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows us no color variation, and I didn't get it. Now we have black and red notebooks. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, but spots of shading. Spots of it. Spots that come in a little darker or a little lighter. Like the K in quick is darker than the rest of the word. The word fox starts very dark, goes to mid-tone, goes to dark again. So there's spots of shading, just not jump out at you type shading. 6 seconds to dry. The scrubby, from far left to far right, does show a slight bit of color variation, and that's what we got here, really a slight bit. Last up is a Vinta notebook. It's the Modern Traveler. Now, we get no bleeding, and I have in here a mark on some ghosting, although it really doesn't look too bad on camera. It would not stop me, the minor bit of ghosting that's going on would not stop me from using this as a pocket notebook. It wouldn't stop me from using the back of the pages. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine, quite a bit darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. 4 seconds to dry. Great for a pocket notebook. The scrubby shows no color variation, and we really didn't get any color variation, and that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Sailor's Clown Teardrop Ruby? There's a certain magenta lean in this red ink. It's the name that makes me absolutely love it. It puts down a nice tone. I can handle that, but I come back to the name. I love that name. It makes me want to be able to write with it just so I can tell people what I'm using. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? A wet, broad pen puts down a very nice tone and allows it to have some nice shading along the way. I know I normally don't care for shading in red inks, I've learned that, but it's the magenta lean of this ink that really lets the shading stand out in a pleasant way for me. I put out a new ink review every single day, so that if you're not already subscribed, I'm going to remind you, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.